Hello and welcome to B Shifter. John Vance, your host here. Today, Nick Brunacini and I will sit down with Sean Glaser and Mike Dobesh. Sean Glaser is one of our lead instructors and an assistant chief from the Vandenberg Space Force Base. And lead instructor Mike Dobesh is the fire chief in Richfield, Minnesota. Both of them, you can find out more about them if you'd like in our show notes. And also in our show notes, all the contact information for upcoming classes. And of course, Nick and I's email if you'd like to connect with us. Today, I'm calling this episode Open Shift. Instead of Open Swim, Open Shift, because we just discuss various topics. It's kind of a roundtable discussion today with a couple of the lead instructors from Blue Card. So glad you're here. Let's get this going here on B Shifter. All right, here we are with Sean Glaser.
Hello, John.
Who's also known as Glacier in some circles. If you're ever at a Blue Card class and you hear him referred to as Glacier, it's a loving name. And then Mike Dobesh is with us. Information on these two in the show notes. And of course, Nick is here to have a little conversation today with you guys on B Shifter. It's good to have you. Thanks for being.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I think the first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, because we have our health and safety workshop coming up, is health and wellness and some of the things that we're doing in the fire service. I know Mike's really familiar with some of the efforts that we have in the state of Minnesota for our MinFire program. Why don't you explain a little bit what MinFire is? And we can give our listeners a background on that and how it got started.
Yeah, so the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, or MinFire, that's a program that was started probably just over 5 years ago now. And that program itself is focusing on the mental health, the cardiac health, and the cancer resolution or cancer mitigation within the fire service. So we kind of took upon those three big firefighter killers. And so far in the state, we've managed to get $4 million in the base public safety budget to be given to the Minnesota Fire Service. And with that, we have basically a Cadillac EAP for firefighters across the state. Every one of the 20,000 firefighters within the state just calls an 800 number and they get hooked up with a clinical psychologist. And then if they need treatment, they can receive treatment through that program. They get 5 visits per diagnosis per year for free. And that's a pretty big deal. We also have basically it's a critical illness policy. So basically a policy where if a firefighter gets a diagnosis of cancer or cardiac disease, they could be cut a check of up to $20,000 depending on their diagnosis. Again, that's free for every firefighter in the state. So we've done a lot of things to kind of forward what the health and wellness of each firefighter in the state is. Minnesota is a state where there's 90% of the firefighters in that state are volunteer. So a lot of them didn't have benefits, and this is a way to give those firefighters some benefits to hopefully keep them on the job a little bit longer.
How many people access that?
So every year it ranges between in our infancy, it was very small. That number was probably 20. We're probably around that 100, 150 number this year alone.
And it's very professional. It's a professional intake. It started off with a lot of peer support, didn't it?
Correct.
And now it's branched over to professional people are actually the ones that are taking the phone call and sorting out what the firefighter needs.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm sure the listeners have heard of Optum Health, right? I mean, a worldwide company with its base in Minnesota. And Optum Health is really the backbone for our mental health services. But we still do have about 75 peer supporters across the state that administer peer support for any firefighter that needs it. So it did start as a peer support network, and now it's really grown to be much more.
I know there's a lot of success stories so far, and either some cardiac issues that have been identified and treated, and of course, a lot of mental health issues that have been identified, and people on the road to getting some help for those.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure to be part of that program. So it's good to see it work.
Yeah. with a larger municipality like Nick used to work at, they actually had a health center that would be the intake for the firefighters. So, we probably have as many professional firefighters that are full-time in the state of Minnesota that probably the size of the Phoenix Fire Department. So it's kind of a somewhat equivalent thing. But you guys had a health center. You actually had a physician working there. How did that whole process work?
Every year you would get a physical. So they would they'd come out a month before and draw everybody's blood. And then you would go in and have your physical. And there was a stress test with it. So they put you on a treadmill, and it was, hook you up to EKG. And then the doctor would examine you and give you recommendations for better health. So it was a pretty good deal. Once a year, you would have a physical, and they would make suggestions. And it was more for the physical piece of it. And then like any injury. So if you got like an industrial injury, a lot of times you would go there for your treatment, and they became kind of an advocate. So if there was any kind of industrial or on duty thing that happened, is the health center and the doctors and the staff there would kind of represent for the employee against the system, the industrial commission system. So, because it was like an insurance company is basically what it was. So as an example, you'd have a guy or you'd have a firefighter that would tear a ligament in half in their knee, and they would go to the doctor and they'd start that process, and then they'd have to go to the industrial commission doctor. Well, that person would say, well, therapy. And then they go to the health center and they say, well, no, your thing's torn in half. You can't rehab a torn in half ligament. It has to be surgically repaired. So there really wasn't a doctor that you saw. It was an accountant who said, this is the cheapest way to get rid of you. So sadly, that's the way the healthcare system works in this country. So anything you can do, like in the case with Minnesota, where you have an inside group that takes care of the health of the firefighters, that is really what they're protecting them against, is the rest of the healthcare system.
And Phoenix had a tiers system that if you were in a certain tier, you would, if your BMI was a certain spot or your blood pressure was high, then you'd start to work toward getting healthier, right?
Yeah, your cholesterol was off the charts. So it was basically anything that like an insurance company would say, no, we're not going to insure you because you're going to die next week, kind of a thing. Well, we had the same deal with the doctors, and they would say, no, you're like at this level of a tier. And if you tier up just another 2%, we're going to pull you out of the field. So, and they would do that routinely. I don't know. During my career, there was probably a dozen or so people that got yanked from the field for a variety of things. Probably half of them was over their body weight. They just were too big. And, like anything else, they're pissed off. And this is, I'm being punished and all this. But really, I think the majority of those folks ended up getting in better shape and coming back out in the field. And really, at the end of it, we're like, it was good that they did this. I would have never done this on my own. And because they did, I have a better quality of life, and then the other part of it's kind of it's a delicate balance there. But firefighters, it's a very physically demanding job. So, and every year we would have to pass minimum company standards. Well, there were some firefighters that's like, no, man, you are like ready to, we're going to be pulling you out of a burning building because you're just not in very good shape. So you had a capacity to fix some of that. And there was it was very unique in the labor management process, because typically when a fire department would come out and say, we're going to do this for the health and welfare of our members, is really a lot of those places were that was what they told you, just so they could fire the people who were running the union because they had pissed them off over whatever else and said, oh no, you're 2 pounds overweight, we're going to get rid of you. So historically, labor forces have always looked at those programs with a little bit of a jaundiced eye. But I think we've evolved to the point now where cancer is the biggest threat to firefighters today. That's what you're going to die of. Yeah. So fixing that, and I think we're all in the same boat with it, is no, this is something we got to do. And this is part of taking care of our members. So that's good.
What's going on the federal
On the federal level, out at Vandenberg, we just adopted the peer support along with Santa Barbara County, and that's something new for us. Normally in the past, we had any type of issues that we were dealing with, we had somebody assigned on the base that would actually through the medical group. The thing with that is they didn't really know us. They didn't know how we responded. They didn't really know the firefighter. And with the peer support now, we're dealing with our peers. We're starting to, actually have people assigned from Vandenberg and throughout Santa Barbara County, which, matter of fact, the last couple of months we've had some pretty bad incidents that we've responded to, and we've implemented the peer support, and it's really helped us a lot. We've come a long way from back in the day when we just sit, go get back from some type of traumatic, call and sit around the table, maybe talk a little, and then you're pretty much, told that, hey, you're good. Let's go back out to work and deal with it type mentality. So, as far as us, we've come a long way, and we're really excited about the program.
Sean works in a very unique setting as opposed to a municipal fire department. Like three of us, you're at a federal fire department that's part of the Space Force. Am I saying that right?
It is Space Force.
It is Space Force.
Yes.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
So you guys launch rockets.
We do.
Vandenberg is a huge property along the California coast, if people aren't familiar with it.
It is.
It was an Air Force base that became Space Force.
Yeah.
So what kind of hazards are you guys dealing with?
Well, just a couple of years ago, we went from being Vandenberg Air Force Base and became Space Force, and unlike most Air Force bases, our primary mission is launching missiles, and that's everything from contract satellites to missile defense. So right now we've got everybody from SpaceX on base. We got Firefly. Like I said, we got NRO that we can't really talk a whole lot about. Mm-hmm. But our mission is pretty much launching missiles, but we still have our standard, flight line. 3-mile runway that we still get aircraft doing transient, coming and going, touch and goes. But us at Vandenberg, we have 100,000 acres and 35 miles of coastline. So we're pretty unique. We're a really big base, and primarily we're wildland. That's most of our response. And we've got the highway out front, so we've got a lot of vehicle accidents out the front gate, a lot of traffic. But compared to your standard Air Force base, we're actually pretty active.
And as far as cancers go, we were hitting on that a second ago. PFAS.
No, yeah. We've right now we have stopped all operations of foam. Unless we get an incident. That's directed from the Air Force and Space Force. But other than that, we're not operating anything with foam.
No training with foam.
No training. Yeah. No training unless we get obviously some type of fuel fire.
How about Class A foam?
Class A foam, absolutely. Yeah, we're still using that. That's not a problem.
And I don't know. During my career, we had a fair amount of success using Class A foam on flammable liquid fires.
We did.
It
we utilize that.
Well
we do that. Yeah, we get vehicle fire. We use Class A foam. We do tend to use the AFFF, but because of all the studies and that, we switched to Class A.
Ain't it crazy? Because the B foam is just inherently the way it's made. It has carcinogens in it. A foam, on the other hand, will protect firefighters against cancer because it gets you through the overhaul process so much quicker, and your exposure is so much less. Wow. It is $0 value fires when I was here. A foam, man. We had apparatus that would flow A foam till the cows came home. You could cut your resources by 80%. Send them home, get the big tractors and front end loaders with the steel wheels from the dump, set up A foam, and it goes away. Wow. It's too easy.
Mike, what are you guys doing with foam?
We've stopped using it, basically. I mean, we carry Class A foam on our trucks, but I can't remember in the last 3 years using it one time.
Yeah, we're using Class A foam, but that's it right now too. So
when I retired, we had compressed air foam on every pumper in this city, and it was night and day. It is 100% more usable for structural firefighting than just plain ass water. Truly.
Yeah, we're just keeping ours mostly, for aircraft fires, fuel fires that we get on the runway.
The B stuff, you wonder how much longer they're going to keep making it.
They can't be.
Yeah, I mean,
there's too many lawsuits.
Right. Yeah, it's just.
Going back to CAFs, because I think that's interesting what you said about CAFs, because I Phoenix was an innovator on that. But it's one of those things you have to use all the time, right? Like if you're not using it for fire attack, especially since the system is problematic, if you don't, you need to exercise the system that's actually physically on the truck, and then your people need to practice with using it because there's a little bit of a sequencing to getting the line active and stuff.
That was one of the issues. We didn't train enough before we did it. They just thought the engineers know how the truck works. Well, like you said, there's a sequence with compressed air foam especially, where if you go to the air compressor first, is you're not going to get anything out of the nozzle but air. So you've got to get your water going, then your foam solution, then your air. So the resistance we had in our department were it got pushed out. The companies that didn't train on it at all, the first time they used it was at a fire, and they had bad results with it. So you would have some companies say, this is horrible, blah, blah, blah. No, you did it wrong. No, we didn't do it, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, it was more of it was spotty the way it got rolled out in the thing. So we would, I don't know, there was a few years where we did training and kind of caught up with it, and it was the companies that understood how it worked loved it. It was a hug and a kiss for them. So, like I said, very effective.
So I want to switch gears from health and talk about command function number 1, deployment. Everybody deploys a little bit different in fire departments, but I think there's all of us around the table dependent on auto aid. I want to talk a little bit about working with auto aid. What is the best practice when you have auto aid departments, like training with each other, SOPs? What sets the stage for good deployment when we're talking auto aid and mutual aid?
Here in this county where we're in right now, is in the late 70s, they went from a mutual aid system to an auto aid system. So you didn't have to ask permission anymore. And you would so when you called for resources, they would send the closest appropriate resources to you, regardless of jurisdiction. So that's the way the auto aid system grew up where I'm from. So during my career, when I promoted up to when I was a chief, I would go to bigger fires, because they call more chiefs and ladders than engines at those things. So it was common that you would be at the scene of a fire where there would be 10 to 11 different fire departments, depending on the size of the fire. But so auto aid worked very well. And what we did is we all used the same SOPs. The volume 2 is what you'll hear. And that's the operation manual that was created by the regional fire departments here in Maricopa County. The Phoenix Fire Department was responsible for keeping that up to date. So, and that was the deal. The other thing that helped that system was the Phoenix Fire Department had the dispatch center that we all used. So when you look at Maricopa County, there's essentially 2 different fire departments that dispatch in Maricopa County, Phoenix and Mesa. And Mesa was so big at the time and so remote from Phoenix, they just kept their own thing. Because we never would end up on each other's scenes, very rarely. During my career, maybe 2 or 3 times, I would end up in Mesa or they would end up in Phoenix. So Mesa kind of kept that capability for themselves, but everybody else that connected into Phoenix got dispatched by the Phoenix Dispatch Center. Well, that created a system where over time, the Phoenix dispatch system would call and move apparatus to fill holes. So they were doing system-wide deployment for everything. And then the system's a little unique here because it was in place for so long, and it's still here, that they started planning and building fire stations based on the automatic aid agreements. So as an example, Phoenix and Glendale share the boundary on the west side of Phoenix. Well, as our communities continued to grow over the last 30 or 40 years, as you would put fire stations in, well, Glendale and Phoenix would sit down and say, you put one here, we'll put one here. So now about half the stations on that border are so mixed that half of their calls are in one city and the other half are in the other. You can't separate them. And people have tried politically to do that, to say, no, we don't want this anymore. There's too much juice over here, and we're going to bust it up. It's almost impossible. You can't unwind it. Fire chiefs have tried to do that. It's just, the thing is so big and so many strings tie it together through the thing. The other piece of that agreement was you had to be going to 4-person staffing. So if you had 3-person staffing, you could be in, but the agreement is no, you're 3 now, you're going to go to 4. You ain't going to 2. If you go to 2, you're out. You're not going to be part of it anymore. There are city managers in this system, and there have been the whole damn time, that don't like that. No, we should be doing 3, and then I can go to 2. And then I could build statues of me and my family all over this city. Well, that ain't the way it works. So they keep getting stymied because the fire department in the late 70s came together and held hands and said, this is what this is going to look like. So they have built a juggernaut here of resources that connect to that. So
SOPs, dispatch, minimum staffing. Is there any other part, like a training part of that, or is there?
Yeah, everybody does. We would do, like, our monthly training was company level training, and all that came out of volume 2. So everybody had to kind of be doing the same kind of training and the rest of it. Now, all those fire departments were autonomous. So that was a good thing. So they had their own identities, their own uniforms, and, we all kind of just worked together. But during the thing, you would kind of scratch your head and think, there's like 28 fire chiefs here. And okay, I mean, could we maybe arrange this where it looks more like we're one fire department? I don't know. But those are the things that, okay, well, who gets to be the chief and who doesn't have a chief, and I get it, but it's there's always room for growth and improvement in everything.
It's interesting because you're talking about a system that is actually bigger than the politics or the chief behind it. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is rather unique because the system is so strong. And like you said, the tentacles are all connected so that any one person with the ego that thinks they're going to break it up just probably gets destroyed by the system.
Yeah, pretty much. And the politicians know that. So they're like, okay, this is where all this is. Well, and the other part of it, I mean, you just talk about the history of the thing, is I got hired in 1980. And during virtually almost my whole career, we were like 100% unionized fire department. So they were the political machine as part of it. So, I mean, our union president probably had more juice during his tenure than any mayor in any of the cities. Probably any 3 mayors put together, because he was in that 25 years. He ran the whole deal. He got people elected. I mean, that's the way the service looked back in the day. Today, it doesn't. I don't think the department I retired from, I do not think is 100% unionized anymore. I mean, it's today. Today, politics have changed. It's a different workforce than it was 40 years ago. That's what happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah.
We're in an area, Mike and I work very close to each other, and we're in an area that could benefit from common SOPs, common dispatch, and minimum staffing. I mean, there'd be nothing but benefit behind that. But getting there seems so hard. I mean, even to come to an agreement on 3 or 4 SOPs is hard, let alone a whole volume of SOPs. So yeah. I think it's a good goal, and it definitely is a best practice and something that we should look at.
Well, exactly. That was our background. I mean, that's kind of where Blue Card came from. Is this is where it was born, is out of this county. So, I mean, and that's kind of what we kept volume 2, and then we figured out a training program that really supported fire command and those SOPs and the work we did and the rest of it. So it's just, because it works. I mean, it's proven. Worked here. It works. It's the best way forward.
You guys do auto aid.
We do auto aid with Lompoc. So that's, most Air Force bases, Space Force bases, we don't get a lot of calls on base. A lot of structure fires and things like that. So we kind of look forward to having those kind of relationships with outside cities. And so we've developed an auto aid plan with Lompoc, but of course now we also have a mutual aid plan with Santa Barbara County and the Forest Service, and that's mostly wildland, where we implement our wildland mutual aid program. But as far as, we got a staffing requirement. We've got to staff at least 3, no less than 3. Training requirements. I know Vandenberg, we've taken upon ourselves to certify ourselves all at the state level. USAR, hazmat, wildland, as far as NWCG. So not just federal, but state. So that way we can, play along with that mutual aid plan with Santa Barbara County. So yeah, it's helped us out a lot.
The extent of our wildland where I'm at is we've got a 200 gallon per minute pump in a pickup truck, and one pickup truck.
Well, that's a start.
That probably goes out once a year for a brush fire.
Maybe come over and help us out.
You guys have to hit it hard, though. If you're getting a brush fire call, you've got to bring in those resources, right?
Oh, yeah. Our first alarm. Yeah, we're automatically our first alarm. We're bringing in Santa Barbara County, Lompoc. After that, we've got a task force coming from Los Padres. We've got air attack coming from CAL FIRE. So, yeah, that's just on initial attack.
We're talking about out west fire departments, just kind of a sidebar, that carry more than one radio. Are you guys carrying more than one radio on your company officers and IDLH?
Everybody, we have the Motorola's, we have the dual bands. Mm-hmm. So we have UHF and VHF. On base, we're required to have our UHF radios that are encrypted, obviously because of security reasons on base. But when we respond mutual aid, we've got to be able to, talk with our partners out there. And so we're lucky enough to have been budgeted for those nice, dual band radios. But, back in the day, we used to carry the BK and the Motorola, but we've kind of evolved a little bit high tech in that area.
I don't know how a company officer in IDLH manages more than one radio, especially these systems where if you're going to call a Mayday, you've got to do it on a specific radio and not on the actual TAC channel that you're working on.
It'd be like the police going back to revolvers and just like giving them 3 bullets and saying, okay, but put these 3 in your 6-shooter and good luck. Yeah, we're going to set this up so we know the communications will fail from the onset. It's a joke.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky, though, as far as when we're dealing with structure fire. It's one radio, depending upon if we have mutual aid coming in or not. But, when we get on a wildland fire, that's when we're starting to have multiple frequencies. When we have air to ground, we have command, we have division alpha, we have division Zulu. That's when it starts to get a little.
But you guys you're using Blue Card as your structural firefighting command system, and you probably use FireScope for wildland, or what do you use for?
Yeah, you know what? We've actually implemented. We are using FireScope for wildland. But we've implemented at Vandenberg a lot of Blue Card. So we're asking for CAN reports. We're level 1 staging. We're using the system for our wildland. So depending upon when we start going up to more of a type 4 level incident, and we've got mutual aid coming in, that's when we got to be careful on our terminology.
Mm-hmm. Mike, you're not doing brush fires.
We had... We burned 1.5 acres, and that was a very large brush fire. So, no.
Yeah, same here. I'm glad. And you guys, once in a while, the desert catches on fire, but it's not. It's not a lot of interfaces there in Phoenix.
No, historically it doesn't rain enough to produce enough brush to burn, and when it does, it's gone so quickly. During my career, I figured out the best course when the mountain is on fire is just leave it alone and let it burn. And it'll be done in about 1.5 hours. And then we just all go back to normal again.
It's a good tactic.
Because there's no property in a lot of it. So, and then there's the mountains that are occupied, they just don't, it's not the same threat as you see in the West. The California brush is a whole different story. Here, it's more forest than Arizona is what burns up. So northern Arizona is a lot more active during the fire season as far as forest. In fact, Phoenix, during my career, we would go up to northern Arizona and send like a first alarm, and they would protect the town where the fire department had been called to fight the forest fire. And that was kind of our... And like most things like that, firefighters get into town and they're doing like the structural and EMS thing. And then there's all kinds of wildland firefighters that circle the town that are, working. And so like the structural guys would say, well, we're just sitting here doing nothing. We're going to go over and help them. And then, so the boss would drive by. Now get back into the station. This is division of labor. You don't do this. This is The forest is under control. So.
Yeah, I do not want to be in that wildland world, man. I'm not in the kind of that's really what kept me out of a Southern California Fire Department, because back in the day where I was making the applications to the Southern California Fire Departments, the only way in was the hand crew. And I went and visited one time the hand crew, and these guys were Adonises. Body fat whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, they still are.
They're clearing weeds all day when they're not fighting fires,
right?
Right?
They're billy goats.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're swinging hatchets and Pulaski's all day.
Oh, yeah.
Not the life for me. Yeah. I'm more of a structure fire guy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference between... You said it, like a NIMS event, something going on with Space Force and Cal Fire and everybody else, where you got airplanes and all the rest going on, is you're not really working in an IDLH. Right? You're not in offensive positions at a brush fire. So you're doing defensive work. Well, when you look at structural firefighting, is we're on one channel because everybody's operating in the same IDLH, so you got to be connected together. The whole rapid intervention piece of that and the help order, you can't use that if you're on 3 channels.
No, not at all.
When Garrison went to Oceanside, the North Zone, that was the deal. 3 channel, automatic aid, command channel, and then your TAC channel. And he says everybody was on scan. That's what it was. So all the attack crews were on scan so they could hear everything going on. He said, we're not doing this. So he took him off. He said, no, I'm the fire chief, and Oceanside ain't doing this anymore. So, and they were starting to look at Blue Card and some other things, but all of a sudden, all the other departments are like, whoa, this is what we do. And he says, nope, we're not playing. Over the next year is they all said, okay, one channel, and went to that. Garrison retired, 2 or 3 years later. And the 2 BCs and 3 captains that try to run everything in the zone said, okay, we can go back to our 3 channels. And everybody else said, we will never go back to that ever again. Because everything he said proved itself to be true. We went back to 1, and you could actually run a fire then. It didn't become this circus anymore. It just became a lot more manageable. So I think the fire departments that are in the North Zone there that are doing that, that's what they use to protect themselves now. And it's like everywhere else, as people start looking at it and thinking, well, maybe there is something to that. So it just becomes a smarter way to do your business in the thing. It becomes cheaper, too, at the end of the day. It's easier.
Well, we do a thing called Timeless Tactical Truths, and we're going to pull out a card at random. You're going to have to think on your feet, Glaser, okay?
Lord. Oh, let's do it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pull out a card at random.
Well, Vance, normally when Glaser's playing cards, there's more than just like a timeless tactical truth connected to the outcome, pal. Yeah.
You know me so well.
This is like the utility bill is on the line.
We'll see how he does. All of us. So this is the Queen of Clubs, and it says no amount of organizational planning and development can outperform an out-of-control, screaming, ego-mad, deranged, manic IC. I don't think I've ever seen this one before. No amount of organizational planning and development can outperform an out-of-control, screaming, ego-mad, deranged, manic IC. So let's all weigh in on this and talk about examples and how do we control this, especially, we brought it up to our class today. We're doing a train the trainer in Phoenix that when it starts bad, it's hard to unravel. So when you get that kind of commander setting it up from the first place, it's hard to recover from. But how do we?
All right. So I'll jump in first. Not exactly my most proud moment, but I remember one of my first fires as a chief officer, being that screaming IC, not having a lot of control and not really we were not doing blue card. It was 2005. We weren't doing blue card. We were just really trying to figure things out like you did back then. And recognizing at that point that there has to be a better way, right? And none of us wanted to continue down the path of screaming ICs. I don't think I've fit the egomaniac part of that, but certainly you could ask the companies that were working that day. I think the challenge is if you don't have a system, if you don't have a script that you're ready to play off of, you are going to be challenged both intellectually and just with the scenario that's playing out in front of you. If you don't have a way to deal with that based on the critical incident factors, using the strategic decision-making model, you are going to be behind the curve. And I think every time you are going to suffer from that.
I think for us, as far as somebody like that's put in charge of an incident, is where Blue Card has really helped us out, is getting into the CTC. And I think a lot of times incident commanders are that way because they're insecure. They may not have the answers, so they don't have that, command and control is one thing, right? Anybody could take command, but not everybody could have control. And when you have that type of personality, and you're insecure and you're yelling all over the radio, you're going to lose the respect from your crews. So I think getting back into the training center and getting people comfortable on the radio, letting the chiefs know, letting the captains know, letting the firefighters know, what our SOPs are all about, let them know how we respond, and all getting on the same page. I think that kind of helps things out by training.
If you look at like a football team, right? They practice during the week, they have plays, and so that becomes like, this is how we're going to do this and that, and all the players practice, and they have a system. And so when the quarterback goes and says, okay, we're doing this play, he doesn't have to explain to everybody, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. They go, 10 seconds later, they hike the ball and everybody does their thing. We don't necessarily do that all the time. And so if you don't have a system, like Mike said, it's frustration. So really what it is it becomes the rules for all of us to work together. And we talk about like the task level and tactics. Well, tactics are just the combined task level activities plugged in together. Well, if you need one engine to lay a line and another to pump the line and then do X, Y, and Z with a ladder in the middle, well, you're managing those tactics. We go out and practice those things. So they just kind of like they say, you practice not until you get it right, but till you don't get it wrong anymore. So it just kind of becomes second nature. So that's what we did in our academy, is we trained everybody in like the standard company evolutions for engines and ladders. So that became, well, I just assumed this is just the way it's always been. Well, what it was is the people before me said no, is we were incompetent, is we couldn't even lay hose. What we did is the older guys would say this. They say half the time that the commander said lay a supply line, they flooded the hose bed. Yeah, and he says, so what are we going to do strategically when you're incompetent on the task level? Well, we're going to do this. Well, then everybody, we can't do that. It's going to be the end of this. Well, shut up and get on the truck and we're going to go train. So that becomes the deal. Sticking with the football thing, John Madden made the greatest video game of all time, Madden Football. It that's what launched the whole goddamn universe of video games.
Sure did.
John Madden is working with a bunch of techs, right? Computer nerds. And they said this would be so much easier and so much better and more exciting if we didn't have 11 players on each side because it takes too much computing power. And you know what he told them? He says, it ain't football if there ain't 11 on each side. Well, we talk about minimum staffing. Well, and today we can't hire, and there's this, that. It don't make a shit. We've already done all the investigation. 4 people is the gold standard of staffing. I was reading some shit in the magazine this month, and it was Jeff King's Mayday stuff. 4-person staffing have half as many Maydays as 2-person staffing. It's all you need to. That's what it is. So you're twice as effective with half the bullshit. So it's just those kind of things that I forgot the question I was even answering.
We were talking about out of control ICs.
Or podcast guests.
Yes,
right. Exactly. This is, I'm a living example.
Well, Bruno used to talk about the early days of command, or the command that he observed was whoever yelled the loudest and had the stinkiest cigar got to be in charge. And that's that kind of ego-driven, out of control, General Pat, and I'm just screaming at everybody type IC versus the one that is on the same level as the tactical and the task. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going to. The most effective operations were the most well managed during my career. They just were. And you know, what's that mean? Well, it means that it would take normally 6 units to put it out in 45 minutes. We do it with 4 in 20 minutes. That's. Oh, well, yeah, we did the job better because we studied it and we practiced it. And that's just, and you would know what that does is that generates ICs where you pull up to the scene and you know, we're going to be here an hour and a half. We're going to be here 15 minutes. It's going to look like this. I need to execute these tasks and tactics, and that's going to solve this set of problems for me. So they're better prepared to handle the emergency scene business they do.
It's all connected.
Yeah, 100%.
Task, tactical, and strategic levels are all connected with one plan.
It is my experience that if you, the people who have worked on ladder companies make excellent battalion chiefs if you can kind of separate them a little further from support work. Because they understand all the different parts and pieces of it. And then when they see, okay, this is the effect of all these different things I do. Well, I noticed the greatest effect is the water on the fire. That solves all our problems mostly. So that becomes 90% that, and the other is support work, which is 10%. So let's do that part, and then we come in behind. You don't do support work in the beginning. You do it at the end now. You got to do fire control first. The fire's just too robust today. It just burns. There's too much energy in it. You got to knock the energy out of it. Michael Carbajal was from Phoenix, Arizona, lightweight champion. He never fought Mike Tyson. That's why he was the lightweight champion. Mike Tyson would have beat him to death. I mean, today's fire is Mike Tyson. I went to some Michael Carbajal fires. You could... Oh, we're going to sit here and watch the flash over. This is going to be fun. Well, good luck today, baby.
Well, that wraps up this Bee Shifter. We want to thank you for listening and spending time with us today. Please refer us to your friends and colleagues. It's how we grow the show. If you have any comments for us, you can get in touch with us in the show notes. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. Until next time, thanks so much for listening to Bee Shifter.